Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the break from Aggie football that we were rewarded in week 7, where we had an amazing slate of football games, and we Aggies could just sit back and appreciate what we were watching because A&M got their work done versus Missouri. You felt good going into a bye week. You felt good knowing that this staff gets an additional few days of work with the team that's been improving week to week, and that you're going to hit the second half of the season, hopefully running. But guys, the break is over. We're back into game week. We got Mississippi State on the road in Starkville, a place where A&M has not performed super well in their brief SEC history. It's time to right that ship, keep improving, and really excel into the second half of the year. So today, guys, I'm going to start a series of 2 videos where we give grades to each of the individual position groups on the team, today starting with the offensive side of the ball. But we're not just going to look back. We're going to look forward as well. I'm going to give each position group a grade, but I'm also going to give each position group's biggest area of improvement that we need to see going into the home stretch of the season. And like I said, today we're starting with the offense. So guys, if you like this kind of content, we're going to keep putting it out. From now to the end of time, I'm going to keep making Aggie content. So make sure you guys like and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Hit notification button so you don't miss my next video. Obviously, during the season, these videos are very time sensitive. As the next week occurs, as the next series of games occurs, the previous set of videos becomes irrelevant. So make sure you hit that notification button so you don't miss a breakdown, a live stream, a watch party. We'll keep bringing it to you all year. So guys, let's get started with the quarterback position. And obviously, that conversation started and ended with Connor Wigman. Going into the year, me and many other Aggies acknowledged that Connor Wigman represented the ceiling to maybe not only the offense, but the team as a whole. You know, you weren't super sure what you were going to get on the offensive line. You weren't sure what you were going to get in the receiver group after losing Aniyah Smith and Evan Stewart. But you felt like you had a really good signal caller coming in, returning for his junior year, coming off of injury. And I had, and many of you guys had acknowledged that maybe this would be a ramp up for Connor. You know, he took a lot of time away from the game, nursing that foot injury, coming back to health, coming back to form, working himself into a new offense under Colin Klein. And that mightily showed itself to an even higher degree than I thought it would versus Notre Dame. He goes down. You're wondering, is this progress going to stall? How is he possibly going to pick up more of this offense and get comfortable if he's hurt with a shoulder injury? But he comes back versus Missouri, and it's maybe the best version of Connor we've seen yet. So to grade this quarterback position, your first test of the semester, or your first test of the first half of the year, you bombed it. And then maybe Marcel Reed kept you afloat with like a C+ kind of grade in the middle portion of that early part of the year. But then Connor comes back and he absolutely aces the midterm, the biggest game of the year, the most consequential game of the year. Now, every game's very consequential, but obviously Missouri was a huge test, being that they had all that preseason hype. They have the talent. They were a top 10 team. And maybe they're not that, but it was still a huge test for A&M. And even if Missouri is at the bottom end of their, possible outcomes for their season, the performance that Connor and this offense put on versus Missouri is absolutely a feather in the cap, a step in the right direction, and a positive grade for the room. So to give a grade for the quarterback position to start the year, I'm going to give it a B. And like I said, you got an F in the first game. You stayed afloat with some C+ performances by a serviceable backup, a growing player in Marcel Reed. But then you end with an A, maybe to an A+. We'll call it an A versus Missouri, because you probably still could have, thrown more balls in the second half. They ended up, kind of throttling down in that second half, running the ball more, only passing 3 times in the second half. We'll give them a solid A to close it out. And we're going to average that out to a B on a little bit of a curve because you had your backup in there. But now you have all this room for improvement. And where does that improvement come from? It's pretty simple. And it's a general rule in football when you're competing at the level that A&M kind of is right now, kind of that mid to high tier team. It's finding consistency. So we're going to give it a little bit of a curve. We're going to go B, plenty of room for improvement. Can they draw up the plays? Can they keep the balanced approach? Can they build on what they did before going into the second half of the season? Because you can't regress. You can't go back into what you were doing early in the year. Inability to find receivers downfield. In the Notre Dame game, which maybe you can call an outlier at this point, just inaccurate, uneasy, unsettled. Just keep pounding the rock, keep getting better and better. Find consistency in the quarterback position. And if Connor remains consistent from where he is right now, you're in for a great finish of the year for the Texas A&M offense. Now let's move over to a position group that's really been positive the whole year so far, and that's the running back room. Going into the year, many of you said, if Le'Veon Moss gets a chance and he stays healthy and the offensive line shows any kind of improvement, he's going to be close to a 1,000-yard back. He's going to be an SEC bell cow. He's going to be an SEC star. And right now, he's third place in SEC rushing. This A&M rushing attack is third in the conference. Oh, and by the way, the second-ranked team in that metric is Ole Miss, who's played one more game than A&M. A&M's running attack is real, and it starts with Le'Veon Moss, who always had raw tools, always had the ability to move bodies, welcomes contact, pushes people back. But now what he's added that is just so unlocking for his full arsenal of abilities is patience and vision and letting his offensive line go to work. He's no longer just running into piles and welcoming contact. He's finding daylight. He's finding creases. He's cutting back. He's patient. He's using his head as well as his gifts, and it's working really, really well for Le'Veon Moss. He has absolutely excelled this year, probably slightly exceeded expectations thus far, and it's been really, really good. But they call the room the stable for a reason. You got 3 guys there that are viable options, and they all play in a game. And Amari Daniels, though he's been serviceable on the year, I still expect another gear for Amari in the home stretch of the season. He was one of my breakout players for the year, and not in like a huge All-American type performance, just as a really, really quality change of pace backup, being that Ruben Owens is no longer, active this year due to injury, and that he had a huge opportunity. And like I said, he's had a few good moments, had a couple touchdowns versus Missouri, had a really good early run on that kind of cutback to open daylight on that first drive of the game. But we've seen him, where Moss has become more consistent in the decision-making and the angles he's taking, running the ball, the gaps he's choosing. Amari's a little bit less consistent there, though he is progressing there. And I really think he's going to have a strong finish to the year. He's at about 300 all-purpose yards on the year. I would like to see him, exceed that mark for the second half of the year. I would like to see him end up over 700 all-purpose yards on the year, just to put a metric on it. But the room feels really, really good because you have such a solid dude at the top, and you don't have a huge drop-off when you put the other guy in. But I think it could be even better once Amari gets clicking. So with that, I'm going to give the running back room the grade of an A-. And I have to leave room for improvement in there, like I said, because I think Amari can really bring that next gear. So again, the improvement is going to be consistency, but specifically in reading your blocks, hitting the correct hole with conviction. Moss has excelled there, but he is still missing a couple plays per game where he could be putting even more numbers on an already pretty gaudy season, and even more so for Amari, who still has a couple of more leaps to make in that department going in the second half of the year. But the O-line's holding their own. They're giving these running backs a good runway, and without the O-line, there's no way the running back room grades in the A margin. They're probably more of like a B, B+, B-, somewhere in there without this tremendous O-line play we're getting, and we're going to get right into that right now. So if you're grading the O-line, the offensive line has kind of been that student that's just kind of screwed around his freshman and sophomore year, spent a little bit too much time in detention, Saturday school, in the dean's office. None of the teachers really believed in him. But then all of a sudden, a really cool young teacher comes in, really gets through to the student that is the offensive line, and the O-line finally breaks through just in the nick of the time, and Adam Cushing is that teacher. But take nothing away from these boys that are actually out there doing the work. Amaj Reed Adams and Kalino Fayu were 2 transfers that have come in and played a huge role on the year. But the O-line being that former delinquent student, they're now a solid B student, like he always could have been, but could now be even better than that. What a massive turnaround for this position group. The pass blocking has been tremendous. On the year, they've given up 42 quarterback pressures at the halfway point, where last year, they gave up 158 total pressures, and their 6-game average was 73. So at this point in the year last year, you're looking at around 73 pressures given up, but this year it's only 42. Major improvements. And maybe more importantly, in the tangible evidence department, they've only given up 4 quarterback hits on pass plays, where they gave up 40 total last year. So they're in a much better realm than they were last year by leaps and bounds. It's a different offensive line altogether with a lot of the same cats in there. And obviously, we're going to keep tipping our hat to Adam Cushing as long as we can. But the running game speaks for itself. Number 3 rated rushing attack in the conference. And like I said, you've played one less game than the second rated team in that metric. I got to give the O-line a B+. And it's hard to call this unit anything but a definite strength of the team and of the offense. especially with that perception that it had going into the year. But even with that perception, this offensive line in general, measuring against the rest of the country and other teams, it's a plus unit. It's a good O-line. It's not just good because it's better than we expected. It's actually an impactful offensive unit. So we're going to give it a B plus right now. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. Now, while pass pro has been pretty consistent throughout the year, and that goes for the running back blocking as well, which goes into their grade, which I forgot to mention before. But there have been 3 games where the running game has kind of stalled, and that's been primarily due to individual busts on the offensive line, as these things typically go. But the Notre Dame game overall, you couldn't really establish a running game. For now, we can kind of pencil that in as an outlier as long as you don't regress to that form. But the first quarter of Bowling Green, you saw several individual busts kind of, disallow this running game from getting any kind of early steam in that game. And obviously in the second and third quarters versus Arkansas, you had nothing going offensively, and that includes the running game. And that's when you had Marcel Reed, where you really, really needed a good running attack, or else you were just a one-dimensional offense or a zero-dimensional offense if you don't even have a running game going. So we saw what happens with this offense when the running game stalls. Really everything stalled versus Arkansas when that happened. But if the Connor we saw versus Missouri is here to stay and continue to excel, it's going to open up the running game even more by the threat of the pass. The problem with the Bowling Green and Arkansas game, like we were just mentioning, is that Reed wasn't letting teams respect the passing game. So they sold out for the run. And even with a good offensive line, if teams are selling out for the run, that's going to limit your running attack. You're going to get busted. You're going to have too many bodies to deal with there. So obviously, if Connor can continue to deal like he did versus Missouri, this offense is going to open up even more and more consistently. But again, the improvement for the O-line is that consistency. And that's the whole thing with the offense right now. It's a common theme right now. Are you picking up on it? I mean, you could throw penalties in there as well. There have been a few holdings, a few procedural penalties by the offensive line. They have plenty of room to improve. The B+, that could easily mold itself into an A in the second half of this year if they just, play game to game, quarter to quarter consistently. But overall, what a breath of fresh air this unit has been, man. I mean, I think we expected at least marginal improvement, but for it to go from like a C- to a B+ group, in my opinion, it's absolutely huge for this offense, and it's allowing everything to breathe. Let's round things out with the receivers. Receiver room is going to get a lot of the same dialogue that the quarterback room did. You bombed the first test, but you showed up in the midterm in a big way versus Missouri, and that's really going to save your score. But look, I've been saying it since the Florida game. The receivers are playing at least a little bit better than what the general dialogue about the room has been. It's been no separation, no game breakers, no big-time players, and maybe it's not a world-breaking unit. But there have been plenty of opportunities missed by a learning young quarterback in Marcel Reed in those 3 games where he was at the helm. And I think the receivers were improving the whole time. We saw versus Arkansas. We saw versus Bowling Green. There were opportunities left on the table, unfortunately, by a young working quarterback. And he's going to get better and better. We're going to keep going back to that. He's super young. He wasn't expected to be the one. He has not been getting the reps with the ones since spring. That's been Connor the whole time. It was an uphill battle for Reed, and just major credit to him for keeping it afloat. I have to throw that out there because you can talk negative about him, but you have to also bring up that he was good enough to keep the team going. But the wide receivers come up big when they actually get the opportunity. I mean, the contested grabs that like 4 different guys came up with versus Missouri. Jabri Barber had that huge crossing route completion early in the game for a first down on a 3rd and 8. Ja'Day Walker had that huge contested grab for like a 40-yard gain. Noah Thomas, back shoulder, ball released before he sees it, quick grabs. Noah Thomas has been a unit for 3 games in a row now. Terry Bussey coming up with jump balls now. Terry Bussey's coming into his own. I mean, it's more than a serviceable room. And in fact, it could become a plus room. Like, I don't think it's going to become an upper echelon room, but I think we have significantly undersold the value of the bodies in this receiver room. But a lot of that's coming as of late, so I kind of understand. Jabri Barber and Terry Bussey, I think, are going to play a huge role in the second half of this season. So to grade the room, I'll give it a B-. Because of what they showed in the midterm versus Missouri, because of the negative game they had versus Notre Dame. Yes, they had separation. They had their moments running routes versus Notre Dame and Bowling Green, but you can't really grade it as a super positive performance if they're not actually getting production out of it. The improvement's really going to come by way of quarterback play. Play calling for opportunity, can this receiver room get schemed open versus a better SEC defense? We're going to see that versus South Carolina a couple of weeks. LSU will give you a decent test. They're not the best defensive unit, but they'll be more of a test than some of the teams you've played already on the year. And obviously Texas to close the year out will probably be the best defensive unit you see the rest of the year. But I'll say this. We saw it more in the Missouri game, but to see improvement, I want to see a continued effort to get players like Barber, Bussey, and Allen the ball in space. I love the bubble screen RPO they've been playing. I want to see more of a screen game going. They've been kind of knocking on that door a little bit, but not executing the best on those plays. I think we've had like two or three totally busted screenplays in the last 2 games. Hopefully this bye week allow them to hone in on some of that stuff. And I want to see the playmakers get the ball in space a little bit more the second half of the year. So that'll go more on the scheming and just overall execution of the team than it will the receiver room, but I'll put it on the receivers right now and their room for improvement. Keep targeting Bussey. Keep getting him involved in games. He's going to get better and better, and he's going to play a crucial role on where this team goes the rest of the year. So B- for the receivers. Again, great room for improvement there. And I think they've honestly played themselves in a better opportunity to score better than that. They just haven't had the cohesive games with the quarterback that they need to accomplish that. But that could be coming. And we'll quickly talk about the tight ends because a lot of the same dialogue there. Another position group that played its best ball recently versus Missouri in the blocking game. Before that, they were very much a part of those O-line inconsistencies we were just talking about. Some of those busts that came versus Bowling Green and Arkansas were by way of missed blocks by the tight end group. We've talked about it all year. It wasn't the best tight end blocking for the first 4 or so games, but they really, really looked good versus Missouri in that department. Theo Orstrom actually had a key block on that 75-yard Le'Veon Moss explosive touchdown, and they're getting better and better there, just like the offensive line is, and I think we'll see that to continue. But we saw Theo reel in 2 touchdown passes in back-to-back weeks. We've seen Watson bring in 6 receptions on the year, but just like the receiver group, probably not given a full showcase due to the quarterback shuffle in that whole situation. But you have 2 really solid options in Theo and Watson. They've been solid when they've been targeted. It's a matter of getting them the ball more. Only 16 targets for a 62% completion rate. I'd like to see them get closer to 25-plus targets with Connor at the helm if he's able to progress and become consistent. Second half of the stretch of the season, I want to see 25-plus targets and get them going. Having said all that, I'm going to give the group a C+, the only C grade I'm giving on the offensive side of the ball. The improvement's going to come from blocking consistency and offensive involvement. I think the latter is inevitable, but I think the former, the blocking, is what they can really control. So overall, the offensive trends really have us feeling good about A&M as a team right now. I'll drop a video about the defense soon, and maybe even the same day I'm dropping this, so look out for that. I want to get these out early in the week so you guys have time to digest this before the game. But most of us felt like this defense was going to be good enough to keep you in games. Now the offense is all of a sudden not looking serviceable or average, but it's really excelled in its biggest test on the year. And it's looking like a plus unit, whereas maybe you'd be okay with getting like a B- offense. You look like you have a potential to be like an A offense right now. But it's all going to come down to consistency. And a lot of it's going to come down to Connor Wigman just being himself for the rest of the season and not having any of those lulls that we saw versus Notre Dame. I think we're able to see it. The table is set for them to go out and build on a really, really strong ending to the first year under Colin Klein and Mike Elko. And you know what? I think they will. I think the best is yet to come. So just keep improving. All right, guys, those are my offensive grades. Stay tuned. I'm going to drop the defensive grades really, really soon. I'm going to try to get that recorded this evening and drop it Monday night at the earliest, Tuesday morning at the latest. So we'll get through the entire team before we get to the Mississippi State game. I don't think I'm going to drop a hardcore Mississippi State preview. I'll more so drop a what we want to see from A&M video, and we'll touch on Mississippi State within that video. And I'll be live again Thursday night to preview the game. So if you guys want to call in and give me score predictions for a chance to enter the Hall of Fame right there, y'all make sure you tune in Thursday night. Thanks for watching. Make sure you've liked and subbed if you haven't. I appreciate you all. Gig 'em.